almost 10,000 families in North Carolina, making deliveries 7 days a week, every day, to people's backyards during lunch, dinner. We send Tylenol in the afternoons, diapers in the evening, just servicing whatever people need in their homes.
I'm Hadas Gold in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Hello everyone, I'm Zain Asher in New York, and this is One World. I want to take you now to Madrid, a highly anticipated meeting taking place between US President Joe Biden and Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is underway as I speak. We just saw them, video of them rather, just ahead of this meeting that is about to take place right now. Expansion is a major theme at the NATO summit going on right now in Madrid, Spain. Today, NATO formally invited Sweden and Finland to join the alliance, paving the way for the bloc's enlargement. This comes after Turkey dropped its objections. The Secretary General calls it a historic moment.
This is a good agreement for Turkey. It is a good agreement for Finland and Sweden, and it is a good agreement for NATO.
NATO is expanding its footprint in the east. Member nations have agreed to strengthen defenses along the alliance's eastern flank as Russia's war on Ukraine shows no signs of slowing. Ukraine's president showed frustration over his country's bid to join NATO as well. The Secretary General reiterated NATO's dedication to helping Ukraine.
Ukraine can count on us for as long as it takes. Allies will continue to provide major military and financial help. This includes secure communications, fuel, medical supplies and body armor, equipment to counter mines and chemical and biological threats, and hundreds of portable anti-drone systems.
Natasha Bertrand joins us live now from Madrid, Spain. We've also got Atika Schubert joining us live from Istanbul. So Atika, let me start with you because President Joe Biden and of course Recep Tayyip Erdogan are meeting as I speak. What are we expecting from this meeting?
Well, I think this was really the carrot that was dangled in front of Turkish President Recep Erdogan in order to agree to allow Finland and Sweden to join NATO. So Turkey has officially said it would welcome them in, and it was promised this bilateral meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. So I think what's likely to come out of this is a discussion of what Turkey wants. Specifically, it's looking to upgrade and purchase a number of F-16 jets. This is something that would require U.S. congressional approval, but it would certainly need the support of U.S. President Joe Biden. So this is certainly going to be a point of discussion. We've already heard from President Erdogan at the beginning of those bilateral talks mentioning especially the grain corridor that Turkey is now trying to negotiate that would allow both Ukraine and Russia to, in particular Ukraine, to sell its grain overseas and ship it out through the Bosphorus. Turkey is trying to negotiate some sort of an agreement that would allow for that. So clearly this is something that he will also be pressing President Biden on. But really already just having this meeting at all is a win for President Erdogan and was likely the thing that nudged President Erdogan into agreeing to allow Sweden and Finland into NATO.
All right, Atika, stand by. Let me bring in Natasha Bertrand as well to talk a little bit more about Recep Tayyip Erdogan and also his position on Sweden and Finland being able to join NATO. What sort of reassurances was Recep Tayyip Erdogan given in order for him to change his stance, Natasha?
Yeah, well, people that we've spoken to, our sources say that actually Turkey seemed to have gotten a lot out of this negotiation with Sweden and Finland. They got concessions in the form of Sweden and Finland committing to designating the PKK, which is, of course, the Kurdish organization that Turkey views as terrorist organizations. They got concessions about coming up with an extradition agreement because, of course, Turkey wants many of the people that it contends are terrorists extradited from Sweden and Finland. It also got an agreement by Sweden and Finland to drop arms embargoes that they had imposed on Turkey following events in Syria. So they got quite a bit out of kind of dragging this process out, because the NATO alliance feels so strongly that Sweden and Finland's accession into the bloc is pivotal at this moment, especially given, of course, Russia's aggression in Ukraine and the possibility that they could launch some kind of provocation against NATO territory. And the accession of Finland in particular was really, really crucial for NATO and for the United States in particular. And President Joe Biden had really been lobbying behind the scenes to see this come to fruition. He had been having phone calls with President Erdogan. He spoke to the Swedish and Finnish leaders earlier this week to give his approval about what they had conceded to the Turks prior to their accession to the bloc. And ultimately, as Atiqa said, President Biden did promise this meeting to Erdogan, which of course is going to be very consequential, because on top of every request that Turkey is likely to make here, President Biden is also going to want to make sure that Turkey is willing to move this process forward quickly, because of course Sweden and Finland are very vulnerable at this moment between the time that they have submitted their applications and are accepted by NATO and the time when they are actually full-on members with all of the protections that the alliance can provide to them. So the president is going to want some reassurances that Turkey's legislators are willing to move this forward quickly, and basically what it's going to be is just hammering out the details of what the next few weeks and months look like as this crucial process moves forward.
And as you point out, both of those countries very vulnerable right now. Natasha, just quickly, how is NATO just overall changing its strategy given the amount of momentum that Russia is gaining in the east right now?
Well, it's a lot of enhancing of force posture. They really want to shore up the defenses on NATO's eastern flank, and they have announced that the amount of troops that are going to be on high alert now in NATO's response force is going to be up to 300,000, and that is up sevenfold from 40,000. That is a massive increase here. A number of countries, of course, will be contributing to that. The United States is going to be increasing its force posture in Europe as well. All of this coming, of course, as Russia has made gains in eastern Ukraine, and as there appears to be a lot of momentum on Russia's side. That is really a direct threat to NATO and to the West, and that is something they reiterated today in their summit declaration. They said that Russia now poses the most direct acute threat to the NATO alliance in decades.
All right, Natasha Bertrand, live for us there. Atiqa Schubert, thank you both so much. As NATO formally extends an invitation to Finland and Sweden, Volodymyr Zelensky is posing a simple but direct question to the alliance. Is Ukraine's contribution to European defense insufficient? And if so, what else is needed? Earlier today, the Ukrainian president addressed the summit virtually and took a dig at NATO's admission process and what he described as a lack of clear direction.
NATO's open door policy shouldn't remind us of the mechanism of the old Kyiv metro barriers. They are open, but as soon as you approach them, they are shut until you pay. Has Ukraine not paid enough? Is our contribution to the defense of Europe and the entire civilization not enough?
On the ground in Ukraine, Russia is intensifying attacks throughout the country, but the last government stronghold in the Luhansk region is bearing the brunt of that violence. The local government says that Lysychansk is under night and day bombardment, with enemy forces putting all of their efforts into storming the city. To the south, officials say at least 4 people were killed when 8 missiles slammed into an apartment block in Mykolaiv. And in central Ukraine, the site of Monday's devastating Russian airstrike on a crowded shopping mall, the tragedy, as I speak, is still unfolding. Crews continue to clear the charred wreckage, a process that could take several more days. At least 18 people were killed in that attack, and dozens more are missing. Let's bring in CNN's Scott McLean joining us live now from Kyiv. So, Scott, overall, the UN is estimating that roughly about 10,000 civilians may have been killed so far during this war in Ukraine. Of course, that number could be even higher, especially when you factor in this disaster at the Kremenchuk Mall. Walk us through that.
Yeah, and Zain, look, this is one of the reasons why President Zelensky is calling for Russia to be removed from the UN Security Council and calling on the Security Council to label Russia a terror state because of the civilian death toll in this war. Of course, that crowded mall not the only civilian target hit, not by a long shot. They have hit schools, they have hit hospitals, they have hit apartments. You mentioned one just this morning in Mykolaiv. The scene in Kremenchuk, though, is particularly disturbing. What's left is really a shell of its former self, if you can even call it that. It's really just a pile of twisted metal that they are now going through, trying to find, not survivors, but trying to find bodies. In that video that you played, it's remarkable that anyone could have possibly survived this. The moment where you can actually see the missile slamming into the mall with a potentially up to 1,000 kilograms of payload, 1,000 kilograms of explosive material inside there. There's another video from a park about 500 meters away or so, which is even more remarkable perhaps, because you can see people get some kind of audio or visual signal that this missile is coming in, and then literally seconds later, that's when you see the actual explosion take place. You see one man grab a child from a pond there and rush behind a tree to take cover. You see another man jump into the pond to take cover from the shrapnel that is then raining down. Remember, Zane, Kremenchuk is nowhere near the front line, so like many places in Ukraine, life goes on as normal. And so people were out for a stroll, people were shopping, people were in the park. And so when those air raid sirens went off, of course, people are supposed to take shelter. But in many cases, in many cities, people have sort of gotten used to that familiar sound. And it is possible that many people chose not to go and shelter. Now, the Russians, of course, say that they were targeting a cache of foreign weapons in that area. The Ukrainians say that there was no military target in that area at all. Either way, it doesn't change the fact that now, as they continue to comb through the wreckage, continue to dismantle that site, you mentioned 18 people killed. They've also found the body parts of 11 people. I should rephrase that. They found 11 body parts. Now they have to figure out how many bodies those 11 actually belong to. Pretty grim. Zane?
That is so disturbing. Scott McLean, live for us. Thank you so much. I mean, as you point out, it beggars belief when you see the video that anyone possibly survived that. Scott, thank you. A former White House aide has revealed damning details about Donald Trump's actions on the day his supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol. Cassidy Hutchinson told a congressional committee that the former president encouraged the mob to go to the building, even though he knew that some of them were armed, that he insisted on joining them, and that he allegedly got into an altercation with his Secret Service when he was advised against going to the Hill. CNN's Jessica Schneider has more on that stunning testimony from yesterday.
That evening was the first moment that I remember feeling scared and nervous for what could happen on January 6th. And I had a deeper concern for what was happening with the planning aspects of it.
Cassidy Hutchinson chronicling the days and hours leading up to the January 6th Capitol attack. The former senior aide to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows were calling a meeting between Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows on January 2nd.
I remember looking at him and saying, "Rudy, could you explain what's happening on the 6th?" He had responded something to the effect of, "We're going to the Capitol. It's going to be great. The president's going to be there. He's going to look powerful." I went back up to our office and I found Mr. Meadows in his office on the couch. He was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, "I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. Sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol." He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, "There's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad on January 6th.
The White House counsel's office was gravely concerned about then President Donald Trump's speech and desire to march to the Capitol, according to Hutchinson.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, "Please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen."
As the rioters were storming the Capitol, Hutchinson testified Trump was cheering them on, agreeing with the chants to, quote, hang Mike Pence.
And Mark had responded something to the effect of, "You heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong."
She says Cipollone replied,
"People are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands."
Hutchinson testifying in the clearest detail to date about Trump's desire to lead the crowd to the Capitol, despite warnings that many present were armed.
They had Glock-style pistols in their waistband.
8736 with the message that subject, weapon on his right hip. Copy that, he's in the tree.
Hutchinson recalled that before the president took the stage, he insisted that metal detectors be removed and individuals with weapons be allowed in to fill the crowd and eventually march to the Capitol.
He was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here.
Hutchinson said Trump took the stage thinking that Meadows was still figuring out a way for Trump to go to the Capitol after his speech. She added that Trump got into his SUV after his speech and was seen in this video presented by the committee driving away. Hutchinson recalling a conversation back at the White House with then Deputy Chief of Staff Tony Ornato about an alleged altercation in the SUV between Trump and his Secret Service agent Robert Engel when he learned that they would not be taking him to the Capitol.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
A Secret Service official familiar with the matter told CNN that Ornato denies telling Hutchinson that Trump grabbed the steering wheel or agent. The Secret Service notified the Select Committee after Hutchinson's testimony that the agents involved are prepared to testify under oath that the incident did not occur. The committee standing behind Hutchinson's account while encouraging others with information to come forward.
Look, I believe Cassidy Hutchinson. I think she's a very, very smart, very capable, very honest individual. She has no incentive to make up something that isn't true.
Many thanks to Jessica Schneider for that report. Let's discuss all of this with CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. Elie, thank you so much for being with us. Gosh, a lot came out of yesterday's hearing. What is the legal exposure in all of this for President Trump?
Well, it's definitely a lot to digest yesterday, Zane. To me, the biggest connection that was made yesterday was this is the first time we saw a direct link between Donald Trump and the threat of violence at the Capitol on January 6th. It's the clip you played earlier where the witness, Cassidy Hutchinson, said Trump acknowledged he knew that that crowd that was before him on January 6th had weapons, and he acknowledged that they were there for him. They would not hurt him. In fact, he was so confident in that, he said, "I want the metal detectors, the mags, I want them taken out." And he also knew that they were headed to the Capitol. In his speech, he pointed them to the Capitol. You got to fight like hell and head down to the Capitol, or else you won't have a country anymore. And so I think when you put all of those elements together, you have the foundation of several potential charges: obstruction of an official proceeding, meaning the counting of the votes in Congress, an attempt to do that by force, which is seditious conspiracy, and bigger picture, a conspiracy to defraud the United States of a free and fair election. So I think those are the kinds of charges that prosecutors need to be weighing now.
It's interesting because even though she wasn't very specific, she did mention this idea of, she kept on hearing the words Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, especially when Rudy Giuliani happened to be around. You know, obviously she didn't offer much in way of specifics, but what did we learn about what people within President Trump's inner circle potentially knew in the days leading up to January 6th about the planning of the whole thing?
Well, I think Cassidy Hutchinson was very careful to delineate what she did know for sure from what she just sort of heard a few times from what she did not know. And I think one of the areas that she did not profess to know everything about is what exactly were the connections between Donald Trump's inner circle, the people who were at that infamous Willard Hotel meeting, Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon and Roger Stone, and some of the extremist groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, who we know stormed the Capitol the next day. The main thing that we found out is that Mark Meadows was in touch with that group over at the Willard Hotel, thought about physically going to the hotel, but instead Cassidy Hutchinson said she convinced him to just make it a phone call instead. But I think there's definitely a lot of gray area that we need to fill in there.
We saw the video of General Michael Flynn being asked, you know, do you think that January 6th, the violence on January 6th was justified? He pled the Fifth. Do you believe in the peaceful transfer of power in the United States? Again, he pled the Fifth. What do you make of that?
It's remarkable to think that this man was a general in the United States Army. Let's remember, he was convicted of lying to the FBI before Donald Trump pardoned him. It's sort of mind-blowing to think you would take the Fifth to that question. Do you believe in the peaceful transition of power? I mean, yes. The answer, yes, obviously, is not incriminating. So the fact that he took the Fifth, I think we can infer that he does not believe in the peaceful transition of power. A person is entitled to take the Fifth under our Constitution. Michael Flynn does have the constitutional right to do that, but I think we're entitled to ask, why might he be doing that?
Right. It's important to note that Benny Thompson actually basically sort of ended by inciting potential witnesses to come forward. Listen, if you suddenly remember something, if you suddenly have developed courage, do come forward. We're all ears. So we'll see who else does end up coming forward. There's obviously a lot of people that we do want to hear from. Right, Elie Honig live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, still to come here, the human smuggling tragedy this week in South Texas shows how some migrants are risking absolutely everything to reach the United States, even, of course, their lives every single day. We'll have more on that ahead.
What do you see when you look at the surface? Just that, the surface. But dive deeper and new possibilities emerge. Essential intelligence from S&P Global takes you here, providing the data, risk assessment, and workflow solutions you need to plumb the wonders beneath. A better, more prosperous future awaits. It's yours for the seeking. S&P Global. Seek and prosper.
Al Ain City, which is part of Abu Dhabi, is my favorite because it has a big history about the country. We are in Jabal Hafid Park, one of the first UAE archaeological sites. This is like a special place for us to do camping in a very modern way. This is a perfect place to relax and enjoy nature.
Blueprint, in association with Qatar Airways.
When the COVID wrecking ball hit the industry and grounded all of the aircraft, we saw people in a state of panic about getting on an aircraft again.
Teague, a Seattle-based tech design company, created a device it says can reduce the spread of viruses on board airplanes.
People's attitudes towards public spaces have changed, so we found a way to make it even safer. It's a solution to social distancing. What AirShield delivers is virtual distancing because you're achieving exactly the same outcome but just by manipulating the airflow.
The device fits over the cabin's air supply and redirects exhaled particles from each passenger straight down through the plane's vents, creating what Teague calls an invisible curtain between neighbouring passengers.
We think this is potentially even the revolution in economy that everyone's been waiting for.
Blueprint, in association with Qatar Airways.
40 men and 13 women, migrants from Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, who risked everything to get to the U.S. only to meet a ghastly death. Their bodies discovered on Monday in a blazing hot truck that was abandoned in a remote part of southern Texas. It's the latest proof of just how unimaginably brutal this kind of journey into the United States can be. Many migrants, of course, feel forced to flee their homes for the United States, driven by, of course, the climate crisis, war, conflict, or political persecution. Others by poverty and the desire to realize the so-called American dream. But immigrant rights advocates warn that U.S. border policies have made it harder for migrants to seek refuge. So the migrants often take more dangerous routes to get to the U.S. Some die crossing the Rio Grande River, and some get beaten up, raped by gangs or smugglers. And many of the hundreds of thousands who make the journey every year are children, who, of course, some of whom are alone and at the mercy of anyone that they come across. Time now for the exchange and perspective on this crisis from a lawyer who has argued some of the highest profile immigration cases in the United States. Lee Gellenert is Deputy Director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project. Lee, thank you so much for being with us. So, just talking about this truck that was found near San Antonio, Texas, 50 plus migrants ending up dead as a result of heat exhaustion. Your thoughts on this humanitarian disaster?
Yeah, it is obviously a tragedy, but unfortunately, there are tragedies all along the border. And what I don't think people realize is that U.S. immigration policy does not allow people to come and apply for asylum in a lawful way at the ports of entry. People have been coming to the ports of entry to apply lawfully and have not been permitted to do so. So they are desperate and they have no choice but to try and enter legally. And so we have been imploring the administration to open up the ports so people can apply lawfully. And if they don't, this is what's going to happen. You know, there are people who may not be able to get to a port because criminal organizations are pushing them to cross in other places, or they have little children and can't walk the hundreds of miles to a port. But, you know, and that will inevitably happen because people are so desperate to escape persecution in their countries. But at a minimum, we need to open up the ports and give people the chance to apply legally.
Let's talk about some of the specifics. We're awaiting the Supreme Court decision on President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. We're expecting that decision to come tomorrow. This decision means that people who are coming into the United States from the southern border, who are seeking asylum, end up having to wait for their court dates in Mexico instead of in the United States. Just explain to our audience a bit more about President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy and what sort of impact that's led to in terms of the crisis, or more of a crisis, at the southern border.
Yeah, so you're right to point out these different border policies. So there are two main policies. One is Remain in Mexico, and as you said, we're awaiting a Supreme Court decision that will come down tomorrow on Remain in Mexico. And what Remain in Mexico says is, when you come to the border, we will send you back to Mexico and you wait for your asylum hearing there. But there's a much more extreme policy that's in place now called Title 42, which says you can't get a hearing at all. There is no asylum. They just summarily send you back without a hearing. So you're not even waiting for a hearing. You're just sent back. And that's affecting way more people now.
And it's important to note the rationale, technically the rationale behind Title 42 was supposedly COVID-19.
Exactly. And we never believed that COVID-19 justified this policy. But right now, there's certainly no question it cannot. And our Centers for Disease Control has said there's no justification any longer. The country is open. We're not minimizing COVID, but there certainly can be steps taken to mitigate the dangers and allow desperate asylum seekers. And in fact, in the EU, virtually every country has managed to accommodate asylum seekers and COVID by taking basic steps: vaccination, social distancing, tests. So we think it's just a pretext at this point to control the border and stop asylum seekers from Central America to apply. And so that's what we're going to get. We're sending people back to real danger, and they're not giving them a lawful means of applying.
So speaking specifically about this disaster with 50 people ending up dead in the back of a truck, you know, part of the issue is, of course, people smugglers. You know, back in the day, they used to be sort of mum and pop sort of people smugglers. Now they're much more sophisticated. They're tied to cartels. They're run by sort of real organizations. What has these two sort of President Trump era policies, Remain in Mexico and also Title 42, what have both of those policies actually meant in terms of providing an opportunity for people smugglers?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right to point that out. It's given them basically free rein. There's no lawful means of coming. The only way you can come is illegally, and so it's just basically a business boost for them. We have been saying to the administration, if you don't provide a lawful means for people to apply for asylum, we're not saying everyone gets to stay, but at least give them a process. If you don't do that, you're just going to play right into the hands of the cartels, who are going to take advantage of desperate people and say the only way to get in is allowing us to try and sneak you in. And, you know, what's notable is that these families are just sitting down right after they get over the border. They're not trying to sneak in. They're just sitting down and waiting for a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol officer to come to them, and then they tell them they want to apply for asylum. We ought to have a legal process for them to do that, rather than taking this dangerous route by smugglers to get in the U.S. only to then ask for asylum, which they could have done in a lawful way had the administration just opened the ports.
So assuming that nothing changes, with, you know, at least in the short term with Title 42 and remaining Mexico policy, what is the best way going forward for the U.S. government to at least clamp down on people smuggling in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, if both of those stay in place, it's going to be very difficult. I think ultimately, I'm not sure if there's no lawful way to come, then I think we're going to see smuggling happen all the time. We need the cooperation of other countries, but it's going to be very difficult if there's no lawful means. I don't know what you tell people who are desperate to escape persecution if that's the only way to come.
Yeah, a lot of people do talk about, though, investing in the economies of some of these countries where they're fleeing from, as perhaps one way to limit the crisis at the border. Lee Gellinghart, thank you so much.
I think you're right.
We do have to leave it there, but thank you so much. All right,
thank you for
still to come
me.
Here. You're very welcome. Still to come here on One World. It's been the biggest modern trial in French history, and any moment now, verdicts against men accused in the vicious terror attack on Paris in 2015. We'll have a live report for you next.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
out front tonight, a potential breakthrough in treating coronavirus.
We've gotten very little help from the federal government.
Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? One of our viewers saw you last night on the show. She says she's going to pay your rent this month. Shut up. I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse, knowing that that could put you at risk for this?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front on CNN.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
Hello and welcome back to One World. Let's catch up on the headlines. Israel is on the brink of officially having a new prime minister and moving election-weary voters one step towards casting their ballots yet again. Lawmakers were expected to approve a bill dissolving parliament, setting the stage for the country's fifth poll in less than 4 years. If everything goes according to plan, Naftali Bennett is supposed to hand power to Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, who will then serve as the caretaker prime minister. New elections would likely take place later on this fall. Hadas Gold is joining us live now from Jerusalem. So Hadas, I understand that you have some new developments for us regarding Naftali Bennett.
Yeah, so Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, just in the last few minutes, we're getting word from his spokesperson that he will not run again in the next election and will be stepping back from politics, from the parliament for now. This is a message we just got in the last few minutes. He says that he will be making a speech from the parliament, from the Knesset, within the next 30 minutes or so. This was somewhat expected because there was a lot of questions about what sort of political future there may be for Naftali Bennett. It was a big question about whether the political party he leads, Yamina, this small right-wing party, would even still exist for the next elections. But tonight he has informed his party that he will not be running in the next election. But when those next elections take place is still a question because, as you said, the current plan is for the Israeli parliament to be dissolved sometime tonight before midnight. And then according to law, at 12:01 on the next calendar day, Yair Lapid, the foreign minister, would take over as prime minister as per the coalition agreement between him and Naftali Bennett. But so far, things do not seem to be going according to plan because there were reports those votes were supposed to be happening starting at 6:30 local. That was an hour ago. And right now, the Israeli parliament is on recess. And so there doesn't seem to be any movement going on. There is some sort of last-minute political brinkmanship being made about some final bills, as well as specifically on when those elections will take place, because once the parliament is dissolved, it triggers elections. But part of the agreement to dissolve parliament is when the elections will take place. Of course, every party has their preferred date, depending on when they think their voters are more likely to come out. So there's a big question about when that will happen. So there will be a big question about whether Yair Lapid will actually take over as prime minister at 12:01 tonight, because if the parliament dissolves after midnight, then he will not take over until the next calendar day, which would be Thursday at 12:01, technically Friday. Zain.
Okay, so we're not sure what we're going to expect tonight in terms of whether or not the Knesset is going to be dissolved tonight. But assuming that things eventually do go according to plan here, you end up having Yair Lapid as caretaker prime minister of Israel. He will then be prime minister when Joe Biden visits the country. Just walk us through what that means, just in terms of the significance of that, and also what sort of constraints he will be under, given that he is technically caretaker prime minister until we see fresh elections in Israel this fall.
Well, there's a lot of significance here, both for Joe Biden, President Biden, when he arrives, and also for Yair Lapid. First of all, for Yair Lapid, he will be caretaker prime minister until those elections. But that doesn't mean that once elections happen, then he's gone, because then a new government has to be formed. And as we saw in that last sort of endless cycle of elections that Israel went through, I think it was 4 elections or something like that before this government came in, is that nobody was able to form a government. And if nobody is able to form a government, Yair Lapid will just stay on as caretaker prime minister for the foreseeable future until a government can be formed. For President Biden, it will probably change the schedule of his trip. Obviously, first of all, he will be meeting Yair Lapid as prime minister and not Naftali Bennett. But also, he will likely then sort of need to meet former prime minister and now opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu, because Israel will be essentially in the midst of an election season when President Biden comes. And the Americans usually don't like to make it appear as though they're trying to tip the scales one way or the other. together. So perhaps, we don't know the schedule yet officially, but perhaps before, when Naftali Bennett was firmly prime minister, there might have not been plans necessarily to publicly meet with Netanyahu, but now there will likely be a very official meeting with former prime minister, now opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu, who was very much trying to become prime minister once again.
And so, of course, all of this chaos basically presents a huge opportunity to Benjamin Netanyahu. All right, Hadas Gold, live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, any moment now, we are expecting verdicts in the biggest modern trial in French history. 20 suspects are accused in the November 2015 terror attack in Paris. Islamist gunmen killed 130 people in multiple attacks at the Bataclan Music Hall, the National Football Stadium, and several restaurants and cafes. Melissa Bell joins us live now from Paris. So Melissa, of course, everyone now remembers, that dark day in French history 7 or so years ago. Just sum up some of the harrowing testimony we've heard through this trial.
It's been 10 months now, Zain, of this trial that is involved, to give you an idea of its scale. Not just the 20 defendants, 14 of whom were in court for much of the trial, including Salah Abdeslam, the last surviving member of that 10-man commando that caused so much death and destruction on that Friday, November 13th, 2015. 10 months of harrowing testimony, 333 lawyers involved, 1,800 civil parties as well, survivors groups, families of survivors that gave testimony. And France really put through that night over the course of the last 10 months. We spoke to some of the survivors as it began last September, and one of them had said to us, look, I am really looking forward to this trial starting, but I really can't wait for it to end as well. It was deeply traumatic, of course, for anyone who witnessed it, for anyone really who was in Paris that night. Remember that it was just after 9 p.m. That it began. It didn't end until after midnight, with a series of coordinated and often simultaneous attacks on cafes, bars, the stadium and the Bataclan, and an entire country really traumatized by what went on. All eyes then very much on what the verdicts will be for these 20 defendants, but mostly for Salah Abdeslam, as that last surviving member who was actually within the 10-man commando on that Friday night, on November 13th, 2015. He then fled, you'll remember, after the attacks, was on the run for several months, was the subject of one of the longest and biggest manhunts in the history of Interpol, hid out in Belgium for 4 months before he was captured and sentenced in Belgium for his part in the shootout there, then transferred to France and kept in solitary confinement until this trial could begin. Initially, and to the great frustration of the families and to France as a whole, he really didn't say very much, apart from pledging his allegiance to Islam. And it was really only towards the last few months that he began to repent, to ask for forgiveness. So it's been an interesting trial to watch, but it is his sentence that really everyone is watching to see very closely. He is facing, the prosecution is calling for him to get life without parole, the toughest sentence you get here in France, and one that's been handed down very rarely. So we're looking to see whether he gets that. He had been pleading for clemency, Zain.
All right, Melissa Bell, live for us there. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching One World. I am Zain Asher, wishing a very happy birthday today to my uncle Obi, who is a very enthusiastic CNN viewer. African Voices is up next. You're watching CNN.
What do you see when you look at the surface? Just that, the surface. But dive deeper and new possibilities emerge. Essential intelligence from S&P Global takes you here, providing the data, risk assessment, and workflow solutions you need to plumb the wonders beneath. A better, more prosperous future awaits. It's yours for the seeking. S&P Global. Seek and prosper.
隅田北斎美術館では当館所蔵の富岳36景神奈川沖浪浦を富士フイルムの協力で高解像度デジタル撮影を行っています。
高画素かつ高精細で撮れることによってさまざまな楽しみ方がさらに広がるかなというふうに思ってます。それがですね、国を越えたり地域を越えたりすることでその資料価値っていうのがさらに上がっていくかなというふうに考えてます。
My name is Jane Herdlicka. I'm the CEO of Virgin Australia. The airline lost nearly $2 billion over its last 8 years. 2,400 contracts we ripped up and renegotiated. We got rid of our long-haul operation, which was structurally uncompetitive. We got rid of a regional business that was also structurally uncompetitive. We focused back on our core, which was a 737 operation serving Australians. Fixing the basics of the business model, that was just a really unique opportunity. And to do it in the middle of COVID, it's really galvanizing to try to figure out how, in the worst moments of aviation, you can take a business and rebuild it and leverage all these amazing people to really do something special.
African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities, impact communities, transform lives. Hear their stories next, in association with Glow. The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa.
African Voices Changemakers, in association with Glow Unlimited.
In Cameroon, we caught up with a former tennis champion who recently returned to his hometown to help children from underserved communities find success both off and on the court.
Nice job. Steady. I want them to believe in their dreams. Keep striving hard. There. Good eye on the ball. Nothing good comes easily. So long as they believe and they keep working hard, they'll succeed. I use tennis to change kids' life. There you go. Beautiful. My name is Joseph Oyebok. I am a change maker. There.
Joseph Oyebok is training the next generation of tennis hopefuls in Cameroon.
Beautiful.
The athlete knows a thing or two about the sport. He's a former ATP pro and Cameroon national champion. He says he fell in love with the sport at a young age.
I was on my way to my primary school and I just, saw Europeans playing on the tennis court at Bota SS Club and just fell in love with the game. I couldn't stop going to the tennis court. And my parents decided to send me away to a boarding school and there were tennis courts there and the passion only kept growing. A few years later, I integrated the Cameroon national junior team and senior team, and General Manager of Sonara sponsored me to France and to the United States, where I played college tennis. Ready? Hopping then.
After climbing the ranks, Joseph returned to Cameroon to give back to his home country.
I said to myself, I would love to, create an opportunity where kids can just go to school and play tennis, and it's been in the back of my mind as a child, and just growing through the different tennis experiences I had. It was so much fun traveling the world, playing the game of tennis, and I thought I wanted to share that with the less fortunate.
Joseph opened the Oyebok Tennis Academy, or OTA, in 1999. He now splits his time between the US and Cameroon. Today we were with him in Douala to meet some of his young prodigies.
Eyes on the ball. There. All the top star players from Cameroon in the junior level all come from the Wall.
This makeshift court, affectionately known as the Wall, is the heartbeat of the academy.
This is the Wall of Bonaberry. So the Bonaberry Wall is known as the home of the fearless.
Joseph transformed his family's backyard into the court to provide a space where children from underserved communities could play.
The kids around this neighborhood have nowhere to go for recreation, nowhere to play sports. There was no way to build a tennis court. There wasn't any land big enough to take a tennis court. The only space we had was just the little garden, which my late mom used to use. So we converted that into a playground, concreted it, and built up a wall so the kids could practice against the wall. And that became our center. It became our go-to place. We didn't have the lines of a tennis court, so we didn't know where to stand. The kids didn't know where to stand. And we got crushed in the first couple of tournaments we tried, but they didn't give up the spirit and they kept working hard. We traced a few lines to represent the court, taught them where to stand, kept walking. And a few years later, they were the best in the country, winning everything.
OTA has since opened 25 centers across the nation and has taught more than 12,000 children how to play tennis.
The ages range from actually 2 to about 18, 19. We have a program called Kinder Tennis, where they just come to eat biscuits and have fun, break a smile. And then we have also our dream team, which is 13 through 18, you know, and then after that we have our national squad players. So they grow through these different phases. Today we have some 20 kids coming from the program with well rankings.
The academy strives to teach children skills both on and off the court.
A lot of these kids come from social backgrounds not known to be wealthy. They struggle a lot. And I think these struggling factors has really helped them in a way, because on the tennis court they fight. They get very, you know, very tough, you know. And what we have done is just try to turn that event into something positive. You know, give them a racket, put them into a working environment where they can train, get some good practice, and they're showing up to be little champions of their own. Move your feet, keep your eyes on the ball, get your hands set up on time. Nice job. There you go. It makes me feel good when I see them play, and knowing that they're getting better, it's quite an accomplishment. There you go.
To expand their reach, the program is building a campus outside of Douala. Coming up, Joseph takes us inside the new facility as they host one of their biggest tournaments to date.
20,000 naira for free. 20,000 naira bonus. Is your line blocked? Then move to Glow.
I'm reconnected.
Because we've all reconnected. And it's simple. Dial *109# and link your NIN to your new or existing Glow number.
Get up to 20,000 naira for free with Glow.
20,000 naira bonus free.
Yes, so free.
Nigel, what are you waiting for?
From the tiniest warbler to the mightiest whale shark, nature is on the move, but natural paths are under threat. Now meet incredible conservationists, helping species cross highways, span flyways, and get from A to B.
This is nature's highway, and we must protect it.
Call to Earth, protecting nature's highways.
Saturday on CNN.
Fearless. That's my message to them, to be fearless.
Former Cameroon national champion Joseph Oyebog is passing on the lessons he's learned to aspiring tennis players.
I want to see you get right there, all right, set up on time there, okay? Ellie, there you go. Beautiful, good job, up. Nice, set up again, set up. Beautiful, from low to high.
Very good. Farm volley. Stay down.
Over the past 2 decades, Joseph has taught thousands of children across Cameroon how to play tennis through the Oyebog Tennis Academy, or OTA. Today, the academy is focused on building the Susa campus.
We are currently at the OTA National Center in Susa. This is where the kids with the most needs, the better players, are being lodged.
Spanning more than 6 hectares, the campus provides dozens of children with a safe space to live, train, and continue their education.
Keep moving. I need to see that intensity. Pick it up.
I'm trying to give them an environment where they can both go to school and study. Education is always the ultimate gift, you know, so I make sure they stay in school, and but also make sure they get adequate tennis, because tennis opens the windows of opportunities for them.
Joseph says it's crucial for every student to get the chance to practice on regulation courts.
It's important because when they go to competition, they need to know what a real court looks like. The instant you decided to be soft with the ball, you didn't get aggressive, he took advantage of that and put it away, okay? Yeah. Think big, think big. You got to take some chances, you got to take risk. And I want to teach them about breaking fear. It would be my mission statement for the week, you know, having them go big with their shots, having them to be bold, courageous, take some chances, take some risk. It's a great satisfaction just to see that they're getting so good, they're improving, they have a bright future ahead of them. If the program just continues to grow and provide the relevant facilities and resources it takes to accompany them, they should be having a great future if this is what they're doing at 10, 11, 12. It's amazing. All right, keep moving, keep moving.
Whether they become world-class tennis players or not, Joseph simply hopes he's done enough to provide his students with a better chance to succeed in life.
High five. That's good, very good. They come from families which do not have much, but I can tell you their heart is what really is the firing power, because they work so hard, they're full of joy. You cannot even tell from their bright smiles if they have any problems, if they have any issues, and they're so dedicated, passionate, and committed to what they're doing. I feel so honored and, privileged to be working with them. I teach them